Hey everyone, it is Yvonne here with Secure Yourself Consulting, where our mission is to consult, educate, and provide individuals tools to increase and leverage financial literacy to not only save money, but to build wealth. Be sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Secure Yourself Co. And typically we have Wealth and Wellness Wednesdays every week where we give out tips. But now we are collaborating with Justin Banks, who is a mental health advocate, to pretty much partner up and explain some of the key reasons why it's important not to obtain wealth, but also have a mental groundness and why they interact directly or correlate directly. So I'll hand it off to Justin and he could do an official introduction.
Thank you. So yeah, hello everybody again. My name is Justin Banks. I am the basically speaker of the Pain to Power podcast. And again, as Yvonne said, I am a mental health advocate. And I'm also really interested in wellness, physical wellness, emotional wellness, and how that ties in to financial health, the financial wellness. You really can't have one without the other. We're not saying be super rich or even extremely healthy, but being secure in yourself, having a nice balance so you know that you are okay. Finances is a skill set, and I believe happiness is a skill set as well. And we're just trying to here to kind of give us those tools and have those conversations that people need so they really can turn their pain into power. So I'm excited to get started.
Awesome. So that actually goes into the purpose and why we decided to partner up. And he definitely hit on pretty much, I'll just recap the top three things. And the first one was to really understand the direct correlation between wealth and wellness, and how they actually play a part in each other, addressing how psychological breakthroughs and barriers are actually able or are needed to overcome when you are trying to obtain however you define wealth. Wealth can just be able to making sure that you live comfortably and setting your kids up for a more easier financial freedom journey, or it could be something where you're literally planning generations ahead. And as well, just understanding how we can, tap into multi-generations and how each generation could take a stand from the younger generations all the way up until the older generations. So I wanted to definitely recap on a webinar that Justin recently had, and it set up a social media post and was like, hey, if you're interested, it was, I think, millennials mental health.
Yep,
Correct
mental
me?
health for millennials. There you go.
Okay, mental health for millennials. And I was like, hey, that's great, because you are a mental health advocate where you are able to explain things in a more professional way. And pretty much what was the purpose and the passion behind hosting that webinars, and when should we expect another one?
Yeah, for sure. So kind of a lot goes into it. Like again, like my podcast is called Pain to Power, and that's kind of how I am trying to live my own life. So even throughout high school and even throughout college, I just realized I had a lot of issues with anxiousness and anxiety and worry. And when you kind of go through that, you kind of can feel alone at sometimes. And even through that process of healing and getting through it, I realized I still felt alone. But then I realized once I got into my own support groups that there were a lot of people who felt the same way. So in actuality, we're not alone. So I want to normalize having mental health concerns sometimes, but also getting the help for it and knowing there's people around you that are dealing with the same thing. People our age are dealing with those things. So when I set up the webinar, I knew that there were a lot of things that we have in common, but we just haven't had the conversations about. We might have it maybe with a confidant here or there, but we don't realize it's a lot of people that are dealing with some of the same issues and are getting through them. So not only are we going to discuss problems, we're also going to discuss solutions. And the more we do that, the better we'll be. So I'm planning to do another one next week. I'm getting all that set up now, and I can't wait to keep this going. We got to keep having these conversations so we can continue to empower each other. So I can't wait.
Yeah, I liked how you tapped into that, normalize having those crucial conversations, right? Because
Absolutely.
we as individuals, we can't fix what we don't acknowledge and
Exactly.
address.
Talk your
And
talk.
I think one of the great things that I took away from the webinar, which I kind of want you to tap into, were that what's considered ACEs, right?
Mhm.
And I wasn't, aware of that terminology, what exactly went into it. But then as you explain it, I'll let you explain it, and then I'll tell you why that was like a wow moment for me once
Yeah.
I saw that, because I was like, whoa.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm a health educator for a nonprofit. So I always teach a lot of kids. And through it, I found out about what ACEs were. So when they say ACEs, they're talking about adverse childhood experiences. So even then I was like, so what does that mean? Like, what are they talking about? And it's basically talking about, traumatic experiences that we may have had as children. And most of us, maybe 1 in 3, have had some kind of experience that is traumatic, maybe losing a loved one or having someone be in prison, your parents divorcing, a parent not being there. There are a lot of things that could be traumatic to us as children. And if you're a minority, sometimes the number of ACEs you have increases. And the more you have, it kind of can be damaging to our future if we don't acknowledge them. So we're talking about getting involved in health risk behavior, like doing more drugs, doing more alcohol, not having a healthy lifestyle. And then also it affects your neural development. So if you're not able to think good or think clearly or be more competent, your level of development and going higher in life is really going to diminish. And that also leads to early death. And that will be another ACE for someone that's probably your son or your daughter, little cousin or nephew, right? So we want to break that. So when we talked about average childhood experiences, we talk about, okay, first of all, recognizing what those can be, acknowledging that it happened, and then trying to find out the resources or tools you need to fix it. So we try to do that with our kids, but they're gonna have to see it from their parents as well, from the adults, so they know that it can happen. So I try to talk about that to a lot of different people because no one really knows about it outside of the education or social work world. And the more we know about it, the better we'll be able to make solutions.
Yeah, that when you touched on that, I think during that webinar, I was like, oh my goodness. And
Mm-hmm.
again, ACEs stand for adverse childhood experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times I know people talk about, oh, that's childhood trauma. Well, that's
Mm-hmm.
pretty much what ACEs are. And
Absolutely.
I think that we're both from Detroit. So
Mm-hmm.
that was another thing because if we're just thinking about demographics and geographics wise, individuals who are in more urban areas,
Yep.
when you talk about some of those adverse, effects,
Yep.
whether we like it or not, we are exposed to it. And I think part of someone like the financial literacy and education aspect is exposing the youth
Yep.
to what they may not primarily see,
Mm-hmm.
and tapping into those organizations or those groups who actually reach out to them, because it's like whatever it is that you want to be, you can, and it's
Absolutely.
really just we all are a constant work in progress.
Mm-hmm.
So the quicker we are able to address our ACEs, I think
Yeah.
it kind of helps you free that mechanism,
Yeah.
which is your mind.
I agree.
Because now you have recognized, like, hey, this might be a trigger for me,
Mm-hmm.
but I know how to manage my triggers. I
Yeah.
know how to manage those things that, might set me off on the edge so that I can think more freely.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I kind of wanted to pretty much pick your brain on when you think about kind of like ACEs in your work, not only with the children, but also trying to educate the adults as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think sometimes the children, they might understand it, but then again, they have to go to a household.
Yep.
And if the parents aren't on the same page with the children, one might be progressing at a more exponential rate,
Mm-hmm.
while the other individual has yet to even touch the surface on some of those things. So like what are some things that you think that you have pretty much seen or utilized when you're thinking about multi-generations,
Mm-hmm.
and working with those individuals to make sure that they're all progressing, one, and then two, you use the term full potential all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So try to kind of like tie that into and kind of like give us insight on what exactly that, means and looks like for an individual.
Yeah. So when it comes to helping out the kids, it kind of varies on their age range. A lot of kids that are like teenagers, they're getting ready for college. So not only do they have, all those events of puberty and all the things that go in with that dealing with, now they got to get into adulthood as well. And then you combine that with ACEs, it might be a lot of things they haven't dealt with. And now they're about to go into college and now they're about to be on their own, basically not handling things that have affected them in their childhood. So you really want to go heavy in trying to educate them on how to overcome some trauma. And that could just be with wellness. Maybe it just might be better eating habits, or maybe you need to go a support group. Maybe you need a therapist if possible, or maybe you just need to be around better people, better friends, knowing how to get out of peer pressure and unhealthy relationships and knowing what an unhealthy relationship is. So if you can handle some of those things as you get out into that adult world, you can still better yourself and be able to handle maybe like childhood trauma without actually having to go to the source of the trauma. You can forgive someone, you know what I mean, without having to actually talk to that person. You can feel better on your own. For the younger kids, they have to keep coming back all the time to maybe a childhood that could be traumatic. So we want to try to get more parent engagement. We want to kind of find out, okay, why is the parent acting like this? Because the behavior that you have could be a repeat of something that happened to you when you were a child. So it's that generational curse type of thing. So you kind of want to educate an adult on what ACEs are, educate them on wellness, and getting them the resources as well. So a child doesn't just enjoy the after school program, they also can enjoy going back home too. And that's what feels good. You want to have a child that feels love and warmth no matter where they go. And then when it comes to full potential, that was just something that kind of was just always pushing me. I just always feel like, you know, if you're waking up every day, it's a gift. You know what I mean? So you want to make the most of it and be your best self. But the key to that is kind of knowing you're not ever at your best yet. So you always need to learn something. You know what I mean? You always want to have something around you, someone around you that helps you better yourself. That's why I'm so glad this is happening, because even now I'm learning a lot from you. So what I kind of like about you, going back to the ACEs, is that you're fighting a childhood trauma that many of us have faced every day, and that's poverty. So that can be traumatic every day because there's so many things that poverty causes. You know what I mean? But by you doing that, you can help somebody get out of that and break those chains. So that really is a next step of being your best self, breaking all of those chains that kind of wear you down mentally and physically. And I think if we continue to do this, you don't know who we can help and how we can help our communities grow.
Yeah. I mean, I think you touched on so many, or you dropped a lot of key gems. And the first one was having those generational breakthroughs and having those moments. Because I feel as if once someone is able, I always talk about the mind. The mind is the most powerful tool because you will be able to propel yourself as far as you want to go, or you will literally stand in your own way based off of your mind. If you can get your mind to literally say, okay, you know what, this is what I'm going to do, and literally constantly give yourself those positive affirmations, and things around you will start to change, then yeah, we will really be able to see those true, individuals or families have those, full potential, or walk in what is considered full potential. Because I think also it's like, I love tying it back to finances, right? Because you also hit on something like in the city, if you are from a metropolitan area, in an urban area, there's typically social classes.
Yes.
And there's social classes all over, but it's very obvious and it's very clear to understand where social classes are in a metro city.
Yes.
So it's just like one of those things that I realized even when we were in school, that there will be certain conversations that just weren't being had, right? And so that's where that financial literacy comes in, because the earlier you are educated and exposed to things, the faster you develop and you start looking at stuff, right?
Yeah.
So if there's a new pair of Jordans coming out, you might be like, you know what? I could just honestly buy Nike stock. You know what I'm saying? Or the same thing, like, hey, the new iPhone is about to come out. But actually, Apple's stock is about to split as well. So I'd rather spend a quarter of how much I was going to pay for the new iPhone to go ahead and get me a piece of Apple, so that, mentally my money will constantly be working for us.
Yes.
And I think that right there, once, once people's mind shifts start changing to start looking at finances and money as a tool, then we're able to start having different conversations.
Absolutely.
Because to me, one thing that I always try to encourage people is to you be the master of your own money. You tell your money what to do. Don't let your money tell you what's going to happen because you have all these bills. If it's something that you can split with somebody, do that, and it's just trying to make sure that you're working smarter, not harder. But those are kind of like the little things that when you had the webinar, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so many little gems that we can actually tie into financial aspects, because it really starts off with the mind, right? So if we can get our mental health in a good standpoint, if we can translate some of our physical health, if you're having physical adversities or health scares, but you know what you need to do, like, hey, that if it just takes 30 minutes, 15 minutes to start off with, get that physical activity. And then you start thinking about stuff differently. To me, that's what I think about. Like, hey, the better that your mind is able to process stuff, the easier you're able to really seize what's actually an opportunity versus what's a roadblock.
Absolutely.
Amen. And go ahead.
No, you good. I'm just saying, amen. Talk your talk. You good.
And the only other thing that I was going to tap into was when you were talking about those barriers. I think JC had something in one of his songs like Hova, and he was like, those, I'm breaking barriers, but those barriers don't really exist. Circling back to multi-generational, because the more you are able to grow as an individual, you are able to literally, what I like to say, put people on. So if I come up on some information and I'm talking to somebody that's a professional, and I go back and I tell my mother something, I tell, the older people in my family, but then again, I use that same information and I set something up for the younger generation in my family. That's 3 generations right there.
Absolutely.
That's literally being positively affected. So, those were some of the common themes and, some topics that I kind of wanted to talk about, and really kind of like piggyback on you, or, hand it off to you to see, like, is there anything else that
the main thing is, like, I know we'll talk a lot on these over future Wednesdays, but the main thing, I'm just excited to kind of tell folks, like, based on what I really like what you said, like, it's really not a barrier. Like, it kind of made me think, I got to break these curses. I got to break these curses. But when I keep saying that, it's like I'm always feeling like I got something locked down on me. And rather than just saying that, why don't I just say, I'm going to be free and I'm going to live my life? I'm going to get what God has created for me. Because if he created it for me, it means I'm supposed to get it. So go get it. And if he's that all powerful, then nothing should kind of stand in my way if I'm standing on that side. So I'm just kind of excited to kind of show how we can be free, whether it be with physical health and the discipline to keep that going. That's very important. The mind is the mind is what makes everything go. So I'm excited to kind of talk about that. And then the same thing, to see how that correlates from a financial aspect. How can I be just as strong here? So no matter what happens, you know what I mean, whether it's injury or whether it's an injury to my bank account, I'm still able to get out of it somehow, some way, and be okay. Everything doesn't have to be this big ditch that we're digging. It might be a little bump in the road, but we're able to bounce back. And that's what we need to be able to talk about, being able to bounce back. Every hit isn't a TKO. We got to get hit and be able to get back up. And that's what I'm ready to do.
Oh, yeah. The comeback is always the greatest part.
Facts.
They take your L's in silence.
Yep.
But let the comeback be greater.
Right. Absolutely.
But that's very good. And I am too. I definitely look forward to, like, what's coming coming down the pipeline. I know like next week, we're going to be rolling out this content every single Wednesday. So look forward to our content every Wednesday. You can find it on my Facebook and IG at Secure Yourself Co. Go ahead, Justin, and put your where they can find you on your platforms, because this is where we want you to get your information. Go ahead, JB.
Absolutely. So yeah, so I'm definitely on Instagram as well as Facebook. For Instagram, it's Justin_Banks_FPP, full potential. You know what I mean? That's what that's standing for. And then in terms of my podcast, the Pain and Power podcast, you can find that anywhere, whether it be Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. And I'm really excited about getting the information out that way. And I need you on that as a guest one of these days too. So we're gonna keep this going and stay consistent with it.
And I just kind of like want to do a quick intro to what we're going to be talking about next week, which is the adverse effects, right? So we're going to talk about how the adverse effects of unstable mental, unstable physical balance, and then how that plays a part financially. We talked a lot, today on addressing those ACEs, right? And we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier on how that actually can play a part, positively, right? We talked about clearing that mechanism, but next week we're going to talk about that adverse effects and how that can really, be a pain point for a lot of people. And then we're going to wheel it back and be like, hey, it might be a pain point, but this is how you literally propel. This is how you prosper within that pain, because whatever causes you pain, it will literally fuel you into whatever you're most passionate and help you pursue those full potential dreams.
Absolutely.
So,
amen.
Thanks again for checking out our Wealth and Wellness collab. And be sure to check us out next week and have a great and wonderful day.
Thank you.